Thank you very much, Jada, and hello everyone. I welcome you all to today's webinar titled The Aftermath of the 2020 Karabakh War, Regional and Global Implications, organized by Ankara-based Center for Eurasian Studies, AVİM İncelemeleri, AVİM. As most of you know, AVİM in its work focuses on the Eurasian region, comprising Europe, the Balkans, wider Black Sea region, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. Our mission is to contribute to the understanding of the challenges and opportunities that the changing global geopolitical context brings about. Obviously, the geopolitical position of Turkey requires utmost attention and diligence to the developments in the Eurasian region, with two hinges on the Balkans and the Caucasus. This is the obvious reason why AVİM organizes this webinar, at which the implications of the 2020 Karabakh War will be discussed by our esteemed speakers. However, the situation in the South Caucasus is important not just for Turkey or the other regional countries. Being a sub-region in the wider Black Sea region, which is the centerpiece of Eurasia as the connector between Europe and Asia, the developments in the South Caucasus shall be paid great importance by the global actors as well. Accordingly, today our speakers will be focusing on the ramifications of the 2020 Karabakh War for the third-party actors such as the EU, US, Russia, and others, and the implications of the emerging situation in the Caucasus, in the South Caucasus, on the wider Black Sea region and beyond. We at AVİM believe that the cessation, the ending of the conflicts and the hostilities and the establishment of good relations and regional cooperation shall be the top priority of the countries in the region to ensure security and to prosper altogether as a region. Because of this, we believe that the ways in which good neighborly relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan could be established shall be discussed, not only by the policymakers, but also by the scholars and experts as well. As you already know from the announcement, we have 5 distinguished speakers today and only 2 hours, 120 minutes. For this reason, I will stop my introduction here and give the floor to our speakers. And I would like to start with Mr. Luke Coffey, and I will briefly introduce him to our audience. Actually, I mean, I'm sure that most of us know Mr. Coffey very well, but still I would like to make a short introduction. So Luke Coffey is a US Army veteran. Currently, he is the director of the Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation. Before joining the Heritage Foundation in 2012, Mr. Coffey served as the UK Ministry of Defense as Senior Special Advisor to then British Defense Secretary Liam Fox. I would like to emphasize that Mr. Coffey was the first non-UK citizen appointed by the Prime Minister to provide advice to senior British ministers. That's something important, I guess. And also Mr. Coffey worked in the House of Commons as an advisor on defense and security issues for the Conservative Party. Throughout his career, Mr. Coffey has mostly focused on issues such as transatlantic security, NATO, European Union, and Eurasian security. And he is a regular contributor to prestigious international press organs. So, Mr. Luke Coffey, floor is yours.
Thank you, Turgut, for that very kind introduction. And thank you for the Center for Eurasian Studies for inviting me here to speak and to be part of such a distinguished panel to discuss some of these issues. In a way, it's lucky to go first because I know Ben and Glenn and I, we always email and chat all the time. So we pretty much know what we're going to say. So I'm just going to say everything for Ben and Glenn, I'm sure, as well. And they won't have anything left to say. So they'll have to get very creative with the remarks here. No, but in all seriousness, it's great to be here. to discuss this very important issue that, frankly, has not received enough focus and attention in the United States. So I want to first briefly go over how I see the geopolitical consequences, the winners and the losers of the Second Karabakh War. And then I want to discuss, a big opportunity out of the war, a big challenge out of the war, and then kind of like a uncertainty, a wild card, if you will, resulting from the war. So in the winners and losers, I'll kind of quickly start with the winners and work my way down to the losers. I mean, the obvious winner here is Azerbaijan, restoring its control over most of its territorial integrity, of its internationally recognized borders, eventually being able to resettle almost 1 million internally displaced people who were kicked out of their homes in the 1990s. And doing so in only 44 days. And for example, the liberation of Shusha, which we're only hearing details about now, about what actually happened. When that full story is told, it will go down in military history as a astonishing feat of courage and endurance, I have no doubt in my mind. So Azerbaijan is obviously the big winner here. Also a winner in this out of this war is Turkey. Turkey has changed the balance of power in the South Caucasus for the first time in about a century. It now has a serious voice and a serious say on matters in the South Caucasus like it never did before. It looks like it will have new transport and trade routes opening up that will connect Turkey with its Turkic brothers and sisters in Central Asia, going through Nakhchivan and the new land corridor through Armenia and Azerbaijan and then across the Caspian. And this offers many opportunities, economic opportunities, diplomatic and security opportunities for Turkey. So without a doubt, Turkey is also a winner. Russia is also a winner here, though. 2,000 peacekeepers in a small rump of Karabakh means that now Russia has, either by invitation, occupation, or through peacekeeping, Russia has troops in every South Caucasus country now. So Russia will no doubt use this opportunity to expand its influence and fully take advantage of the geopolitical situation. It remains to be seen, where this will rank in Putin's overall priorities, because he's had quite a few setbacks in Syria, quite a few setbacks in Libya. Belarus still remains unresolved. Eastern Ukraine, there's still fighting going on. And then, of course, on top of all of that, you have the consequences and impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in Russia, a poor economic situation in Russia, and also, low oil prices, which just doesn't help the situation for Moscow. So it could have been that this peacekeeping operation was something that Russia really didn't want to do, or didn't really hope to have to do. They probably, at this time in history, they probably would have preferred that none of this happened, but nevertheless it did. And Putin, being an astute politician and statesman, fully took advantage of this situation. So Russia is also a winner. Now, Georgia. I put Georgia on the winning side, but just barely. Definitely not a loser. It's more of a neutral position in terms of the outcome out of the war. The reason why I slightly put it on the winning side is because it was able to meet a national objective, which was for this conflict not to spill over. And if that was the metric, if that was how Georgia was gauging its success or failure out of this conflict, then it did succeed. But it's also a loser in a sense, because now, Russia has a further squeeze on the region, which does not help Georgia at all. But Georgia was able to walk a tightrope, geopolitical tightrope, to keep a balance, to make sure that the ethnic Armenian and ethnic Azeri populations inside Georgia didn't, the conflict didn't spill over to them. All the while doing so while I think at least privately, when I speak to Georgian officials, they're sympathetic to Azerbaijan's position because of the issue of occupation and what Russia has done to Georgia over the years. So I think Georgia is a winner, but just kind of like barely. It's there are good arguments to say actually they're not a winner. They just like got through. They weren't losers. They weren't winners. They just got through the conflict. Okay, I could buy those arguments as well. A big loser is Iran. There's now a new geopolitical reality on the ground for Iran and its northern border. And it's trying to, I think Iran is trying to figure out what all this means for the future. We have seen already the mobilization of some Iranian armed forces to the north. Whether this is temporary or this will be permanent, who knows? And I'll talk a little bit more about Iran in a little bit, so I don't want to talk too much about that now. And then obviously the biggest winner the biggest loser, of course, is Armenia. The country has been thrown into political turmoil. Thousands of young men were killed for a cause that was hopeless almost from the beginning. And it's no doubt that many Armenians are upset with their government because the war lasted 44 days. And for 43 of those days, everyone was told that they were winning. And then all of a sudden, they're told that they're not winning and they're surrendering. So it's not surprising that you're seeing this backlash against Pashinyan in Yerevan, and it's no surprise that Putin's very happy with this because he enjoys having Pashinyan on the ropes, and if Pashinyan survives this, it will be because Putin wants to keep him on life support. But I still think his days are probably numbered. And for the United States, in the bigger geopolitical view of the situation, and when you consider the U.S. focus on big power competition, I would say that the situation in the South Caucasus is more advantageous to the U.S. now than it was before. Of course, the U.S. didn't have a dog directly in this fight. I mean, there were many in the Armenian diaspora here in America that would have loved to airdrop the 82nd Airborne Division into Karabakh, without a doubt, although they probably wouldn't have gone themselves, so they would have been very happy for someone else to do it. But America, of course, didn't have a dog in this fight. But there are geopolitical implications that we have to consider and we have to be aware of. And the fact that the major oil and gas pipelines through the Ganja Gap that feed Europe and international markets weren't disrupted, I think is good for the United States. The fact that Iran has a new geopolitical reality to deal with in its north is good for the United States. The fact that Turkey has more influence, NATO member Turkey has more influence in the South Caucasus, I think is good for the United States. While the presence of Russian peacekeepers in Karabakh is not good for the region or Azerbaijan, from a U.S. being very, looking at it very one-sidedly, from a U.S. point of view, Russia being occupied and focused on yet another problem is also good for the United States. The U.S. didn't have a dog in the fight, but at least, the outcome, of course, wasn't bad necessarily for the United States, I would say. Now, in terms of opportunities and challenges, the one big opportunity I see out of this conflict is really doubling down on some of the regional energy infrastructure projects to get more oil and gas to Europe to make the region less dependent on Russian and Iranian oil and gas. And now that, one of the biggest concerns about BTC and Southern Gas Corridor and Baku-Supsa and all these other pipelines and motorways and fiber optic cables and rail links that all pass through this narrow corridor on the Eurasian landmass through Ganja into Georgia, then Turkey and international markets, was the threat that this frozen conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh and the 7 surrounding districts could spill over and disrupt the flow. For the time being, there seems to be enough stability on the ground where this is no longer a major concern. That doesn't mean it won't be a concern in 10 years, but right now it's not a concern, and we can breathe a sigh of relief, and we can really focus on some other regional infrastructure projects. And I would like to see the US and the Europeans get more involved and more vocal on this. And for example, the Trans-Caspian gas pipeline linking Central Asia through Turkmenistan under the Caspian to Azerbaijan to link up to the Southern Gas Corridor. I think this offers a lot of potential for Europe's energy security and for the South Caucasus as being a continued region of importance when it comes to Europe's energy security. Russia, of course, has always blocked this idea because it doesn't like the idea of this gas flowing to Europe outside of Russian territory. But there are ways that perhaps Azerbaijan could sweeten the deal and also create goodwill in the region. And this would be maybe to think about, and I'm thinking big here, and I appreciate that there were very good arguments against this, but I'm still going to throw this idea out there anyway. Create some sort of natural gas regional infrastructure project that connects Azerbaijan with Armenia and then into Nakhchivan. So you could have a Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Nakhchivan, Turkey pipeline. And this would do a number of things. It could help Armenia because they need diversification in their energy. It could help Nakhchivan, and it could help Azerbaijan ensure stability with its gas flow to Nakhchivan. It would help Turkey continue to solidify its position as a major hub for energy in the region. And it would help Turkmenistan and other countries in Central Asia that have gas diversify their economies a bit and help them out economically. I appreciate this. We're not there diplomatically. We're not in that diplomatic space yet in Baku or Yerevan for this level of regional cooperation. But there, the fact that the one issue that was discussed at the recent trilateral meeting in Moscow was on regional connectivity, albeit focused on rail, but still the fact that that was discussed shows that there is some appetite for regional cooperation. And just think how many billions of US dollars in foreign investment have been denied to the South Caucasus because of the frozen conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh. And hopefully this will change in the future. So that's one opportunity. In terms of one challenge, in 5 years, the first mandate for the Russian peacekeepers in Nagorno-Karabakh or in Karabakh, it expires. It can be renewed automatically for another 5 years if either side doesn't object. But Azerbaijan needs to be working right now with the international community, with the OSCE, and even with Russia to explain that in 5 years, we want this Russian peacekeeping force transitioned into a international or multinational civilian monitoring mission. Azerbaijan should be very upfront with this with Russia. Of course, Baku has negotiated the withdrawal of Russian forces in the past with the radar station. Russia should be consulting with countries like Georgia on their experience about hosting monitoring missions because of Georgia's hosting of the EU monitoring mission. Azerbaijan needs to take steps and policies that demonstrate to the world and to the ethnic Armenians living inside Azerbaijan that they will be treated fairly and they will be safe and they can practice their religion freely. This needs to be demonstrated very clearly because this is one of the big issues that Russia and Armenia use as the excuse for maintaining this peacekeeping force presence. So we need to find a way, perhaps like everyone's asking, well, what's the new mission of the Minsk group now? Well, maybe the new mission for the Minsk group should be to get a civilian monitoring mission on the ground in Karabakh and get the Russian peacekeepers out. And I'm not holding my breath. I'm not optimistic. I agree that this probably will not happen, but it definitely will not happen if there's no effort to try. And if you look at, history tells us it's not going to happen and these Russian peacekeepers are going to be there for a very long time. But I still think that the OSCE, I think Azerbaijan should be trying to make the case as to why in 5 years Russian peacekeepers need to leave. And then the wild card here, and I'll conclude here. The wild card, the unknown here, I think I go back to Iran. Iran, of course, has a lot of domestic pressures right now. The maximum pressure campaign from the Trump administration has really turned the screws on Iran. And we shouldn't kid ourselves that on, at 12:01 on January 20th, all of a sudden Iran's problems are going away. They're not. Even if the Biden administration came in and undid all the sanctions, which I don't think they won't, it takes time to feel the impact of this sort of sanctions relief. So Iran's in a very bad place. They now have they had a relatively quiet northern frontier that they didn't have to worry about. They could worry about the Gulf and what's going on in Syria and Iraq. All that has changed. Nobody knows what this means for the region. Nobody knows what this means for Iran. Azerbaijan is less reliant on Iran now than it was in the past because there is a new natural gas pipeline going from Turkey into Nakhchivan. Before, the gas was part of a swap deal with Iran that allowed Iran to give gas to Nakhchivan. That's no longer needed. There's now a land and air corridor that will be created through Armenia, linking Azerbaijan proper with Nakhchivan. Before that, you had to fly over Iranian airspace. I very nervously have done that flight in the past. I was praying that this plane would not have a technical problem and have to land in Iran. They probably wouldn't welcome Luke Coffey from the Heritage Foundation very much, but that air corridor is no longer needed. So Azerbaijan no longer has to be as nice, at least publicly, to Iran as it has in the past. There's no reason for it to really start a problem with Iran, but there is under the surface all that tension with the ethnic Azeris that live in northern Iran, or southern Azerbaijan, as some people call it. So this is an unknown, in my opinion, that policymakers need to keep an eye on, especially those policymakers in the U.S. who focus on Iran. They need to realize that there's more than just the Gulf in Syria to watch. So those are sort of my thoughts and comments about the geopolitical implications for the war. And I'll turn it back over to you, Turgut, and I hope that I encourage some good discussion and questions later on. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this presentation. You provided us with overview of the winners and losers and opportunities and challenges. And as I mentioned in my introduction, I think we should really look to find ways to enhance opportunities in this region, to establish good relations and neighborly relations and regional cooperation. So that's why I think thinking about the opportunities is a very important task for all of us. Thank you very much, sir. And now our second speaker will be Mehmet Oğuzhan Tulun. Mehmet Oğuzhan Tulun has been working as an analyst at Center for Eurasian Studies since 2013. And at AVİM, he specializes in Caucasus and Turkish-Armenian relations and the concept of constructive Eurasianism. He also works on the relationship between religion and politics in this region and in the world. He's a managing editor of the peer-reviewed biennial journal Review of Armenian Studies, and this journal publishes papers to stimulate interdisciplinary debate between scholars and practitioners on topics relating to Armenia and the Armenian world. So he's making a huge contribution to our intellectual life with his journal. So Mr. Tulun, and also Mr. Tulun regularly contributes to various media outlets with his commentaries and interviews. Mr. Tulun, floor is yours.
Thank you, Turgut. Hello, everyone. I prepared a small presentation to show you. Let me switch it on first. Can you guys see it? Turgut, can you see the presentation?
I see it.
Okay, thanks. Hello, everyone again. So in this presentation, I will go over some of the changes that have happened in Armenia after the Nagorno-Karabakh War and what this could possibly mean for Azerbaijan and Turkey. In terms of regional stability and cooperation, which is something that Turkey and Azerbaijan want, this war should have pushed Armenian policymakers and the public to realize the following points. One, this war was the result of a long-running state policy of intransigence and irredentism by Armenia that constantly antagonized Azerbaijan and basically blocked the reconciliation process run by the OSCE Minsk group. Two, because of this conflict, Armenia's relations with Azerbaijan broke down. At the same time, due to Armenia's aggression against Azerbaijan, its weaponization of historical disputes with Turkey, and more important, its insinuations on Turkey's territorial integrity antagonized Turkey. So what this resulted in was Armenia's isolation from the region and from regional projects, which pushed Armenia to be both militarily and economically over-dependent on Russia. And obviously the way out of in order to break out of this isolation, Armenia must reformulate its policies and to seek and to mend ties with its neighbors, Azerbaijan and Turkey. But so far, we have not seen this happen. And only, from my perspective, only a small minority of Armenian experts and policymakers have come to this realization. Overall, we have seen a different set of results in Armenia because of this conflict. So one of them was the debunking of a myth and the identification of the real enemy. So what am I talking about here? The myth was that Armenia was invincible and that Azerbaijan was incompetent. And if a new war was to break out, Armenia would this time march all the way to Baku. The 2016 four-day war should have been a wake-up call for Armenia, but not enough people realized the danger, the warning that this war served for Armenia. But it was the 2020 Karabakh War did the job. So it turned out that Azerbaijan was not incompetent at all. And the Armenian policymakers' statements on deterrence through punishment and a new war for new territories turned out to be empty rhetoric. But it's interesting now, seemingly as if to boost Armenian public's morale, they have latched onto a new narrative, which is that Armenia did not actually lose to Azerbaijan. It lost to NATO member Turkey. It's a much larger country, much larger population, a NATO-trained army. So obviously Armenia was going to lose. And at the same time, from the Armenian perspective, this was not surprising because Turkey has been out to get Armenia since the alleged genocide in 1950. And I'm going to quote an article that was published in one of the Armenian media outlets. It says, Turkey's presence and influence has grown exponentially in the region, and Armenia has to deal with an unrepentant perpetrator of genocide at its door. And it's interesting that since July of last year, some commentators have been repeatedly misquoting a speech made by Turkish President Erdogan, where he supposedly said that Turkey will finish the job that its ancestors started. But if you actually analyze his speech, he doesn't say anything like that. There's simply no way to derive that kind of a meaning from this speech, but they use that misquotation nevertheless. So this, I wanted to show you this caricature. It's interesting because it shows Turkey as a neo-Ottoman snake threatening Armenia. As you can see, that's the Mount Ararat being encircled by the snake Turkey. It just shows you what kind of threat perception Armenia is producing against Turkey. The second point, there seems to be an attempt to drive a wedge between Azerbaijan and Turkey. Why are they trying to do this? Turkey, obviously, is too strong for Armenia to take on by itself, but it can drive a wedge between Turkey and Azerbaijan to disrupt, quote unquote, Turkey's neo-Ottoman and pan-Turanian plans. For this to work, articles have been surfacing where it is implied that Turkey is a threat to Azerbaijan's sovereignty and that Turkey is steering Azerbaijan according to its own selfish interests. And I'm giving here another quote which says, Azerbaijan, whose leader Ilham Aliyev has been duped by Turkey with the slogan of one nation, two states, while in fact it has turned out to be one nation, one state. Obviously, this is meant to cause suspicion amongst Azerbaijanis and cause tensions between the two countries. A third point, portray Turkey as a dangerous power with regional and global ambitions. Turkey's strained relations right now with the US and EU over regional issues and Turkey's approach to global politics has led Turkey to being branded in Western media as a revisionist neo-Ottoman power. However, Armenian commentators have seized on this and taken this to the extreme end. For example, even during the clashes, Prime Minister Pashinyan argued that should Turkey emerge victorious from the war, they would wipe out Armenia and then Turkey would be at the gates of Vienna again. Obviously, this is to capitalize on the rising Turkophobia and Islamophobia prevalent in Western countries. And also, which is interesting, is they're trying to portray Russia as supposedly having to take a step back against Turkey's growing influence in the region and its cooperation with various countries such as Ukraine, Georgia, and Azerbaijan. This is obviously meant to induce fear in Russia that is being approached by Turkey. A fourth point, which is something that has been indicated before, is the alleged failure of Western-oriented policies in Armenia and the increasing weight of hardliner groups. So, as everybody knows, Prime Minister Pashinyan is under tremendous pressure because of his perceived failure in the war. And he's being branded as a traitor who sold out Armenia's interests and capitulated to the enemy. But the Armenian public seems to be forgetting the fact that this failure was not simply on part of Pashinyan. This was years in the making. And I would argue that the totality of Armenian politics was to blame for what happened to Armenia in this war. At the same time, since Pashinyan came to power with promises of reform and a clearly Western outlook to politics, this is being interpreted as the failure of Western-oriented policies and political ideas. So, in its stead, we see the rising importance of actors that are actually more harmful for Armenia and for the region. One example, obviously, is the Armenian Revolutionary Federation. And at AVİM, we have been following the ARF's activities for a long time. And they have demonstrated clearly that they're basically an Armenian supremacist party that legitimizes the use of violence and terrorism for political ends. Another example of a rising actor is Vasgen Manukyan, who's a unified candidate for the opposition. And he made some outlandish claims about how Armenia had the strongest army in the Caucasus and that Armenia was weakened in the last 2 years, hinting at Pashinyan's failure. And that a large force will gather against Turkey and the world will not forgive Turkey for insolence. If an alliance against Turkey is formed, we will be in it. This just goes to show you that the vindictive mentality in Armenia is going strong. And it's finding voice in Armenian politics. And at this point, I would like to quote a very interesting interview done with an Armenian scholar. It's interesting because this scholar has stated basically what we at AVİM have been observing for years. So I'm going to read it in full. Our entire political discourse is drenched in such pathos-infused idiocies which have pushed everything rational out of our public conversation. And people who stood up against it and insisted that the reality should not be confused with desires have earned the labels of the enemy of the people, traitor, and Judeo-Masonic conspirator. Because in this pitiful intellectual atmosphere, only odes to the nation and the pseudo-artistic competition of who has more extravagant aspirations are truly Armenian and patriotic. Rational thought and speech are foreign and extremely suspect. The calls to stop treating reality with contempt are also deemed treacherous. Unfortunately, this observation by Grigoryan, Mr. Grigoryan, represents a minority of views in the diaspora. But one, I think, and we at AVİM think, reflects the truth. Another point that the outcome in Armenia, number 5, pushing for recognition of Nagorno-Karabakh as an independent Armenian entity. So in this sense, this interesting term called remedial secession is being thrown around for the recognition of Nagorno-Karabakh, even though it is not applicable to the case. And in this point, I'm going to quote my colleague Turgut. He explains it well what this means. So in general terms, remedial secession is a doctrine that advocates unilateral secession as opposed to internal self-determination, consensual secession, or secession as a result of the dissolution of the parent state. It is a last resort solution that is to be implemented after the exhaustion of all other possible remedies to mass, systemic, and gross human rights abuses and other violations perpetrated by a state against a specific people, which is part of its population. So Armenian actors, I should say, are arguing that Azerbaijan fits this narrative of abusive power, and that in this respect, the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh should be granted independence. It is also in line with this campaign that we saw the French Parliament pass resolutions in support of such a recognition. This happened a couple of days ago, knowing full well that Azerbaijan would be upset about this move. The Armenian Minister of Foreign Affairs nevertheless paid a visit to Nagorno-Karabakh and met with the senior members of the Armenian separatist entity. And we see now that the territories that were taken back by Azerbaijan are now being branded as the occupied territories. So they're trying to perpetuate the portrayal of Azerbaijan as an aggressive country and that Karabakh is rightfully an Armenian territory. And lastly, the last one, number 6, Armenia lost the war because it was militarily weak, so invest more in military for a possible new war. I mean, it is natural that a country that has faced military defeat would want to invest in its military, but it's interesting that the comments coming out of Armenian policymakers seem to go beyond that, in the sense that they're implying that the improvement of Armenia's armed forces will be instrumental in a new military confrontation with Azerbaijan over Karabakh. And considering that irredentist ideas about Karabakh continue to enjoy strong public support in Armenia, this could be interpreted as Armenia being amidst a preparation to eventually instigate a war again, to push Azerbaijan back and reoccupy Nagorno-Karabakh. So in conclusion, while the fighting is over between Azerbaijan and Armenia, the struggle for the future of the region continues. And in fact, I would argue that the real challenging process starts now. And the questions that remain to be answered are, what will be the final status of Nagorno-Karabakh? Will the ethnic Armenians and ethnic Azerbaijanis be able to cohabit Nagorno-Karabakh in peace? And what will happen to the governing body and armed forces of the separatist Nagorno-Karabakh conflict? And the fact that the issues that are outlined above continue means that the reconciliation process between the two countries will be more difficult than what outside observers would initially believe. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Tulun. And actually, I didn't know the content of your presentation, and I'm hearing it now. And I think your presentation and Mr. Coffey's presentation really completed each other, because Mr. Coffey talked about opportunities in the region. And actually, in my point of view, like infrastructure projects and other things are really important, but also having good faith and having a constructive approach is also very important for all the parties. And your presentation gave us some idea about the approach of one of the parties of this conflict. So I think we should also think about the attitudes of the parties with respect of establishing good neighborly relations and regional cooperation. Thank you very much, Mr. Tulun. So now our third speaker, I would like to invite Mr. Glen Howard. Mr. Glen Howard has been serving as the president of the Jamestown Foundation for the last 16 years. As most of you know, Mr. Howard is an expert on Eurasia and Russia, and he has been extensively dealing with issues related to Russia and Eurasia. In his professional life, Mr. Howard worked at the US Embassy in Moscow from 84 and 86. And an important note is that Mr. Howard also worked for Dr. Zbigniew Brzezinski. You all know him, I guess, between 2002 and 2008 as the executive director of an advocacy organization working on the resolution of the Second Chechen War. He's the author and editor of several books on Russian military strategy and doctrine. and he contributes to renowned publications such as Wall Street Journal, Real Clear Defense, and The Hill. So, Mr. Howard, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the very nice introduction you've given me. It's great to see some of my colleagues here today speaking. It's a great honor to also be speaking with our friends and colleagues in Azerbaijan and also Turkey and elsewhere. I thank you very much for inviting me to speak in AVİM for this opportunity to discuss the aftermath of the 2020 Karabakh War, regional and global implications. I'd like to start off by saying I'm going to try to divide my presentation into three segments. The first segment will be along the notion of the idea that the Karabakh War, was a perfect storm for Azerbaijan and for Turkey from a variety of perspectives. As we know, timing and everything in war, diplomacy, and in life is everything. So, and this happened to be a perfect timing for these two important countries. The second part of my presentation today will be what the Karabakh War means for Turkey, the Caucasus, and the Black Sea region. And my last point, something we're all interested in, is what the incoming Biden administration, what that will mean for the region in the aftermath of the Karabakh War. So I'd like to kind of go into some of that discussion as well, so that some of my friends in Turkey can perhaps have some insight. I don't claim to have to know intimately what the Biden administration will be doing towards the region, but I do have some inclinations to watch. So I think that that'll be important in how we kind of look at that, and want to share some light on that. So starting with the Karabakh War, I'd like to kind of dive into this idea that the war was a perfect storm. And what I mean by that is that the war was all about a timing, and the timing was a combination of many different factors. And I think to start with, the Trump administration, which was heavily focused on national sovereignty over multilateralism, was really a golden opportunity for Azerbaijan and Turkey in the particular instance of what happened, starting with the 44-day war in September. I think and what I mean by that is the Trump administration basically did not go for heavy engagement in the Caucasus. It kind of more or less abandoned the OSCE as negotiator. It took this hands-off policy towards the region and was very kind of disinterested in the region. But that ended up being a good thing, because when the fighting did start, Trump made some overtures and statements about Armenia, but I think that's more attributed to his friendship with Kanye West, whose wife at that time was Kim Kardashian. So I kind of attributed that, and it was an election campaign as well. But I think that the Trump administration, by playing kind of a hands-off policy, allowed Azerbaijan to also kind of pursue its goals and objectives in a way, and keep the other great powers kind of outside of the conflict. And so it was also a perfect storm, because Armenia screwed up. I mean, they started with the July offensive, attacking Azerbaijani territory that was completely outside of Karabakh, not even related to Karabakh. And so the Armenian and the Pashinyan's very horrible relationship with Putin certainly played a role in that. And that's what I mean by it certainly was a perfect storm. So Turkey also played its cards right. I mean, it was a very, I think the deployment of Turkish F-16s to Ganja sent a signal to Russia that it was prepared to defend Azerbaijan. Erdogan played a very prominent role in trying to signaling that Turkey would back Azerbaijan. I think that was a signal to the Russians to kind of stand down and not get involved. But I also attribute this to a period of the diplomacy and good relations that President Aliyev had with Putin. So I think that, you know, the more Azerbaijan kind of won on the battlefield, the more Russia realized it couldn't get involved, and it was ill-advised to get involved. My last kind of point on that theme is that the war was a perfect storm. That military policy is all about, in the case of Azerbaijan, using its oil wealth to develop a national economy by building pipelines, oil and gas pipelines, Baku-Ceyhan, Baku-Tbilisi gas pipeline through the Southern Gas Corridor. They built a railroad with the Kars-Tbilisi Railroad. They used the past 10 years as well to build a national army that was modeled on the Turkish army as Azerbaijan abandoned its Soviet and Russian past. But also, Azerbaijan was out of this period, was able to build completely from the ground up a national defense industry that I think is going to be a model to many countries, should be a model, because it completely had no military industry at all. And now it was able to rebuild this industry or build it from scratch using lots of advisors and using the oil wealth to develop something that really helped it pursue its national goals. So I think that was a very critical component of it. And I think that Putin staying out of the war was very critical. I think I think we can all debate on what Russian peacekeepers in Lachen mean. But I do think that this war was a turning point for Russia's presence in the South Caucasus. I think that COVID also had something to do with it. President Putin, I think, seemed to be preoccupied in some ways with COVID. So I think that kind of was an issue that was something very important to them and kind of infected the Russians. So now the next part of my presentation is what the Karabakh Wars mean for Turkey, the Caucasus, and Black Sea region. I think that we need to understand that in the South Caucasus, certainly, to use the phrase, there's a new sheriff in town. And I think that is Turkey is certainly signaled its preparation and and has won reluctantly the recognition from Russia that Turkey has regional and very important security interests in the Caucasus, and that Azerbaijan is a full-fledged military partner and ally of Turkey. And this is where this situation has greatly changed, because it will affect the way that Iran looks at the region. It'll affect the way that Armenia looks at the region. And sadly, American policymakers don't quite understand this yet. And I'm not saying that Russia will continue to be irrelevant in the South Caucasus. I just think that there's certainly, Azerbaijan has stood its ground, built a national military. Turkey has its back, so to speak. And I think that this has allowed Turkey to, in new ways, to kind of pursue new policies, as we've seen with Erdogan's recent trip to the EU. I think that solidified its eastern flank, and this will have implications for the Black Sea region as well. So I think that is really significantly important. The next part of this is what will the incoming Biden administration mean for the region in the aftermath of the Karabakh War? Well, as I started my presentation by saying that the Trump administration certainly had a policy of national sovereignty, when it comes to the Biden administration, you need to keep in mind that multilateralism is back. And so I think there will be more efforts by the U.S. To engage in the region that we'll see, but I think there'll be a variety of factors will kind of affect Turkey and Azerbaijan in the aftermath of the war. And, now that Azerbaijan is beginning a period of reconstruction in Karabakh, multilateralism being back is really also a very good signal in the way that Azerbaijan will be trying to economically develop the Karabakh. The Biden administration will be coming in trying to repair relations with its allies in Europe. It'll be back to a lot of global investment forums on globalism is back. And so the idea of trying to bring Iran, normalize relations with Iran, as Luke alluded to, certainly Iran is going to be a factor, but I think that the more the Biden administration engages with Iran, the more opportunities this opens up for Azerbaijan and Turkey to take a deep breath, relax a little bit, because Turkey will be able to pursue through the Nakhichevan corridor its trade ties with Azerbaijan to Central Asia. So this will buy some time as the Biden administration in my opinion, will focus initially on human rights issues for a while, but then will kind of, once it's kind of irons out and develops its ideas about Europe and its strategic policies and deals with COVID, I think by the time that happens, it will have given a window of opportunity to Turkey and Azerbaijan. So I think the normalization of relations with the U.S. and Iran will also be benefit, allow Azerbaijan to look south, to continue to develop its railroad connections with Iran, and open the doors to trade with the Persian Gulf. So I think that will be a very important factor. Now, that being said, there are also some areas of concern. Now, the Biden administration has appointed some key people that are bad news to Turkey and Azerbaijan, ostensibly, with the appointment of Brent McGurk to the White House. Everybody knows that Brent McGurk was the architect of U.S. support for the Kurds in Syria. So that will create some problems for Turkey. But I think there's also a problem because of Victoria Nuland has been appointed a very senior post in the State Department. She's a champion of human rights. So I think that this is going to further kind of create some problems for Turkey, a little bit for Azerbaijan, I think. We don't know where Mike Carpenter is going to end up in the administration. I think Mike Carpenter will be a champion for U.S. engagement with the Caucasus. He understands the strategic importance of Turkey. And this new woman, Sloats, at the NSC is also a champion of engagement with Turkey. So I think there's some balances and counterbalances within the Biden administration. They're going to try to pursue the Summit of Democracies, where they'll bring to Washington all these supposedly democratic countries to Washington for a meeting, and then they're going to not invite Poland, they're not going to invite Hungary, and they don't plan to invite Turkey. So that is not going to put things on a good footing. But that also explains why I think President Erdogan has pivoted to the European Union, and he's putting his money on Germany. And so I think that the game of counterbalancing is going to continue in the region. And I do foresee that if the United States starts an engagement policy in Syria, and backing the Syrian opposition, the YPG, and the PKK, that will strengthen the PKK and that will create problems. So I do see if the U.S. pivots to that after they consolidate their policies, that will create tension with Turkey, obviously with Azerbaijan, and then that will lead to growing military, or not, I would say more of a kind of a bounce back position with Russia. Now, the key thing here is my Turkish colleagues keep talking about the importance of the balance of power. Henry Kissinger once said that if there's one thing that he could teach Americans about would be to learn and understand the European balance of power. Sadly, he said Americans did not understand that because America is very new to European politics and geopolitics. And most of our experience has been shaped by the Cold War, where we thought of Turkey as a backwater of NATO, a very quiet area. And we are now having to recalibrate our position because Turkey is not a backwater. It's the front lines. It's the geopolitical pivot. Turkey is a part of that, as well as Azerbaijan, in the regional balance of power. And I think American officials are going to have to try to understand that and fit this into their new kind of conceptions. And I do say that I think there is a growing recognition in Washington of the importance of the Black Sea region. The problem is that you can't pursue a policy of supporting Ukraine and deterring Russia in the Black Sea without Turkey. And you can't arm and equip the YPG and get Turkey to support you in the Black Sea. This just won't happen. So I think that ultimately, at the end of the day, it is about military power. Turkey's looking out for its interests, Azerbaijan looking out for its interests. And I do foresee a kind of a strategic pause for the next year, kind of in relations while we understand what's coming and what the Biden administration will do about its policies. And as we all try to recover from the COVID crisis and rebuild our economies. And I think that is going to be a big focus of U.S. policy and Azerbaijan and Turkey continue to kind of pursue that. So I'll stop on that note. I think I'm probably at 12 minutes, 13 minutes for my talk. So I'll give yield the floor to my other colleagues, and thank you for this great opportunity. And I look forward to questions too during the Q&A.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Well, actually, one of the questions that we mentioned in our announcement of this event was the effects of the new configuration in the South Caucasus on Turkey's relations with Russia and the West. And actually, your presentation was an answer to this question. Actually, you mentioned the incoming Biden administration, and as I understand, there are both opportunities and challenges with respect to Turkey's relations with the US. And actually, I find it very important what you mentioned, that you mentioned the connectedness of seemingly different issues like Syria, Black Sea security, Ukraine, and South Caucasus and Turkey. So I think that's very important, and the policymakers should have a holistic view, not like a particular view on different issues. Thank you very much, sir. And now our fourth speaker is Ben Hodges. Mr. Ben Hodges is a retired Lieutenant General of the US Army. So today we have two former US Army members, Luke Coffey and Ben Hodges. Welcome, sir. After graduating from the United States Military Academy in 1980, he was assigned to various critical posts in the US Army. Actually, referring to all these assignments will take a long time, but I would like to remind you that General Hodges served as the commander of the NATO Allied Land Command in Izmir, Turkey, and his last assignment was as commanding general of the United States Army Europe in Germany from 2014 and 2017. So Mr. Hodges joined the Center for European Policy Analysis in 2018 after retiring from the US Army, and currently he is the Pershing Chair in Strategic Studies at CEPA. And besides his work at Center for European Policy Analysis, Mr. Hodges is contributing to international media with his op-eds and analysis. Mr. Hodges, the floor is yours.
So, Professor Tuncel, thank you. I just want to clarify, you said I graduated from the Academy in 1980, not 1918. I think some of my soldiers believe that I graduated in 1918. It was a long time ago, there's no doubt. First, let me say thanks to AVİM. Ambassador Kılıç gave me the privilege about a year and a half ago was my first visit there. And I was so impressed with the quality of the team and the classic, very Turkish custom of being extremely polite while being extremely critical. And it was a good experience for me to have to answer some really challenging questions in a friendly environment. And I appreciate you giving me the privilege again to do this. I wish so much that I was actually in Turkey right now to be there with friends. And I think I really am grateful for the chance to. I want to use my time to focus a little bit on how important the Turkey-U.S. relationship is. That's my biggest takeaway from what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh is how out of position we are and how much work needs to be done to rebuild the trust in our relationship. Now, I remember in 2013 when I was the commander of NATO Land Command in Izmir. What a wonderful place. I loved serving there. And I had a breakfast with a senior member of the staff of the Turkish General Staff. He was the J5 at the time, and he was responsible for plans and policies. And I said, "Sir, good morning. How's it going?" And he looked at me and said, "Ben, I wake up in the morning. I have Russia to the north, Iran, Iraq, and Syria to the south, the Caucasus to the east, and the Balkans to the west. It's a hell of a neighborhood." And of course, I knew that, but I didn't really know that. I didn't really appreciate that a Turkish General Staff officer or a minister would wake up every morning thinking about who's all around him. Obviously, it makes common sense when you think about it. But at the time, to be honest, most maps that you find in any NATO headquarters, the Black Sea is down in the bottom right-hand corner. And Turkey is right there in the bottom right-hand corner. So most people in most of Europe and in the United States and in NATO, Turkey's down at the bottom right-hand corner. You know, my Norwegian friends always complain that the most important part of Norway, that top 10%, is always cut off on the map so that you can make everything fit. And Norwegian officers will tell you that's strategically, that's the most important part. And so if we can take the map and move the Black Sea up towards the middle of the map, then to policymakers and members of Congress and strategists and people who think about the region, all of a sudden the South Caucasus, it jumps out how important the South Caucasus are, how important Turkey's position is, not just to contain the old Soviet Union, but as a bulwark to anchor NATO's southern and eastern flank, and to recognize the challenges that are around there. And so in a moment, I'm going to talk about what I think the United States and Turkey need to do here. But I'll never forget the general telling me it's a hell of a neighborhood, and it really is. And I think if we can look at that, and by the way, look, these are friends here, so I owe you the courtesy of being candid. My desire to improve and rebuild trust with Turkey does not excuse what I think are some bad decisions by Turkey, some bad choices, but none of these are irreparable, as well as the bad decisions that the United States has made in this relationship. So my friend Luke made a comment in the very beginning, and I'm not going to repeat all the good stuff that he and Glenn and Mehmet have said. I want to try and maybe fill in some gaps, but I will repeat this. Luke said the United States had no dog in this fight in Nagorno-Karabakh, and he's right. And that's the problem. The United States doesn't feel like, why do we care about that? That's some obscure leftover Soviet legacy. It's somebody else's problem. But as my friend Luke has also informed me, there are only 3 corridors for trade between Eurasia and Europe. One goes through Russia, one goes through Iran. 2 bad choices as far as I'm concerned. And the only other one goes through this corridor of Azerbaijan and Georgia. So it is in our strategic interest, but I think not enough people in Washington or frankly in Brussels really appreciate that. We should have had a dog in the fight. And this is what I hope the new administration, when they come in, is that they immediately develop a strategy for the whole Black Sea region. Glen Howard is exactly right. You can't have a strategy for Ukraine and a strategy for Turkey and a strategy for Georgia. You need policies for each country, each ally and each partner, but you need a strategy for the region that makes sense. And then I think if we have the right strategy, then we recognize the strategic importance of Turkey, not just because of the Straits, but because of all this other neighborhood and the cultural and historical influence it has in the region. So we should have a dog in the fight because we have allies and friends that are there. And by the way, I will say it right now, Georgia should be in NATO today. And I think it's very important that Turkey has been an advocate for Georgia joining the alliance for a long time. And I hope that the Biden administration will be very loud and clear about this as well. Now, I am a little bit more optimistic about the Biden administration than perhaps Glen is, although he has more experience with some of the people that are coming in. I think that the new administration is going to be clear-eyed. President-elect Biden has already made it very clear that rebuilding alliances, rebuilding relationships is going to be at the top of their list of things to do, partly because he's a traditional transatlanticist to begin with, but also because we know we do not have enough capability or capacity in terms of military or even economy to do anything by ourselves, that we need allies. And though I hope I'm wrong, I believe that we're going to be in a war with China, a kinetic conflict with missiles and planes and ships. I mean, bad, not nuclear, but bad, within the next 5 years, unless certain things change. And so that's why I think the new administration is going to emphasize making sure that our European flank, which includes Turkey and all of our allies and friends around the Black Sea, that is secure to be able to continue to deter the Kremlin while the United States has to focus in the Indo-Pacific. Now, I hope I've gotten that completely wrong, but based on what I see happening in the Indo-Pacific now and the language that comes out of Beijing, I believe that this is a real possibility. Now, this is also, of course, we are in great power competition. And the fact that even though maybe it wasn't in the original plan, the fact that we now have Russian soldiers in all 3 countries of the South Caucasus is remarkable. They occupy 20% of Georgia and nobody cares. I mean, honestly, even the government in Tbilisi right now hardly even talks about it. But yet 20% of Georgia is occupied by Russian soldiers. 11 years after the signing of the so-called Sarkozy agreement, when they should have been long gone. You have Russian bases in Armenia. And I think Armenia should really seriously reconsider their relationship with the Kremlin, because clearly the Kremlin stood by and allowed Armenia to be crushed. And yet they still have bases there that allow them, which they flew into, to go up and occupy their peacekeeping positions in Nagorno-Karabakh. And then, of course, now they do have Russian troops inside Azerbaijan as part of this peacekeeping. And of course, I like to use the peacekeeping as in P-I-E-C-E, keeping, that they show up and they keep a peace, not the peace. And I mean, nobody should be surprised by that. And I will buy Luke Coffey a steak dinner, the biggest steak he could find, if 5 years from now, the Russians say, okay, we've done our part, we're out of here. All right. I hope I buy that steak for you, but I feel pretty confident in that wager. I have looked and I have not been able to find what is the specific mission for these peacekeepers, the Turkish and Russian peacekeepers. What's the mission? And also, what are the rules of engagement? I mean, if you're a peacekeeper, there are very strict rules to follow about use of force, for example. And I have, all the pictures I have seen of the Russian troops that were there these guys are fully loaded for combat. I mean, magazines in their weapons. This is not a normal peacekeeping profile. So I think this is something that all of us should be watching, and Turkey could end up owning part of a mess when these peacekeepers are tested, as we know they will be tested at some point by somebody. I do want to make one comment that's at the tactical level, but I think it's relevant to this, and then I will close with what I think needs to be done to rebuild the relationship between the United States and Turkey. It's about the technology. Turkish defense industry, if I had any money to invest, I would be pouring it into the Turkish defense industry right now. Turkish defense industry is clearly on the ascendancy. We've had the chance to demonstrate remarkable capabilities in Syria, in Libya, in Nagorno-Karabakh, and other places. It's powerful. And I think the partnership between Turkey and Ukraine in defense industry also makes a lot of sense. And I hope that the United States will want to find ways to cooperate here. But I think a lot of people will draw the wrong lessons from what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh. What we all watch, video after video after video after video of drones, Turkish, Azerbaijan drones, destroying Armenian equipment, killing soldiers, destroying rocket launchers on the ground. And some people were quick to say, that's the end of tanks, that's the end of armored vehicles. All you have to do now is have drones. I would say, yes, the technology was impressive. And frankly, it looked to be relatively cheap. And Azerbaijan appeared to have unlimited amounts of ammunition. But what I looked at, it appeared that the Armenian forces never got better. I mean, they never adapted. When you look at all the targets, these soldiers were sitting in the wide open, unprotected, as if they could not be seen. And of course, that's a failure of their leadership. They were not prepared. There were a lot of reservists that were called up very quick that were not prepared for this kind of conflict. And Mehmet, I think you did a nice job of explaining that the Armenian forces, and it always happens that the young soldiers pay the price for the old leaders, and political as well as military leaders that do not have them prepared. When you saw video of soldiers from Azerbaijan, they were in uniform, they were fit, they were ready. When you saw soldiers from Armenia, they looked like reservists who had just gotten there. Never in uniform, trash everywhere, all indicators of poor discipline. And that's not the fault of those young men, that's the fault of their leaders. They were not ready. And so before people say, okay, this is the end of tanks, this is the end of everything, what our Azerbaijan did, they integrated technology with disciplined, well-trained troops with good operational planning. And I think, again, all three of my predecessors, my colleagues, have highlighted some of the reasons for that. Let me close with what I think needs to be done. A friend of mine called it Turkey USA 2.0. It's time to come to 2.0. United States and Turkey have been allies really since Turkey joined NATO. Turkey's been a member of the alliance since 1952. There's been a headquarters from NATO in Izmir, longer than anywhere else in NATO except Naples. I mean, that's a consistency. No matter who was in power in Ankara, there's always been a NATO headquarters. So Turkey has always contributed to everything. It's been a reliable ally. And I think that that's lost on my friends in Washington and also in Brussels, that Turkey has been reliable. That doesn't mean it's always easy, but there's nothing in the Washington Charter that created NATO that says, and we're all going to love each other all the time. I mean, that's not realistic to expect that, but there should be trust and confidence. And right now, I believe that Turkey does not believe that the United States or most of NATO would actually come to its rescue if it got in trouble. Of course, I think Poland does not believe that Germany would come to its rescue if it really got into trouble. So the need to rebuild trust is very important. Now, if it was easy, it'd already be done. So we've got some real tough issues to discuss about perceptions of democracy in Turkey, Turkish perceptions about US support for terrorist organizations, the Gulenists, for example, bad decisions that we made about supporting Kurdish forces in Syria. We've got a lot of hard work to do to repair the lost trust there. I think we need to reframe the relationship. The relationship now is based too much on military. It needs to be more about economy, business and less driven by military considerations. I hope that the new administration will build a golden bridge to help us get out of this mess with the S-400 and the F-35s. In my view, there's no excuse, no justification really for Turkey buying S-400, but that should not, our relationship should not be based on S-400 or not. It should be based on trust, and we've got to figure out a way to an exit strategy, frankly. There's got to be some way to do it. Get Turkey back into the F-35 program. We would benefit, Turkey would benefit. But it really comes down to rebuilding trust with an ally that should not be at the bottom of the map. Çok teşekkür ederim.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, General Ben Hodges. Well, actually, I don't have a military background, but I always love listening to people with military backgrounds because they always provide us with different perspective. And actually, I find it quite important what you mentioned about the possibility of a war with China and the imperative to deter Kremlin while U.S. is occupied with China in the Indo-Pacific. That's a very important view and idea, I guess, and I think we, the political scientists and analysts, should really think about such possibilities, putting the regional politics and the situation in a wider security and military perspective, and you provided us with a general perspective. Thank you very much, sir. And yes, I hope, and everybody hopes, that Turkey and US will solve their disagreements in the near future. Thank you very much, sir. So now we are coming to our last but not least speaker, Mr. Alev Kılıç. Alev Kılıç is a retired ambassador from the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He joined the ministry in 1969, and he served as the ambassador to the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia between 96 and 98, and then ambassador permanent representative to the Council of Europe in Strasbourg. And after that, between 2001 and 2004, he served as the Deputy Undersecretary of the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs for Economic Affairs. And then Ambassador Kılıç again served as the ambassador to Switzerland, and then ambassador to Mexican United States until 2011 when he retired. After he retired from the ministry, in 2013, he became the director of Center for Eurasian Studies. Mr. Ambassador Alev Kılıç, floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Turgut, for those kind words. And may I express my compliments to all the previous speakers, particularly from the United States. I can really say this without hesitation. I have no disagreement whatsoever with what you have said or presented. I think I can go along with all those views, and I find that very positive and very useful. And I must also say, I'm much impressed with the insight you have to this backwater part of the world in South Caucasus. My really compliments on that. But that part is of vital importance for Turkey. South Caucasus, as General Hodges mentioned, and also I quote him from an article, that it is the gateway for Turkey to Central Asia and to the Turkic world in Central Asia. So it is, in that sense, two hinges, two wings of Turkey, one in the Balkans and one in the Caucasus, extending up to Central Asia. So things have changed dramatically since the collapse of the Soviet Union. So we have to really view the world in its new potentials. It is often said that Prime Minister Churchill's quotation, Iron Curtain fell to Eastern Europe. It did not fall only to Eastern Europe. It also fell to the east of Turkey, to the Caucasus, and to Central Asia. So when the Soviet Union collapsed, it was then the hurdles, the obstacles for Turkey to communicate, to extend to Central Asia, where we have, I'll not go into the details, extraordinary roots and relations. It was all open. So in that sense, Turkey, after this new development, found an opening to the East. So it had to assume new responsibilities and a new role. This sometimes did not fit with the Cold War taboos and rules and regulations. So Turkey had to also adapt itself to these new opportunities. Now, two things further, I would say, changed this Turkey's outlook. One was its more or less rebuff from the European Union, in the sense that Turkey never was given a green light to join the European Union. It was kept on the fringes of the Union, but never seen as eligible to be inside the Union. Whereas Turkey considered itself always from the beginning a European country looking to the West. Our place is in Europe. And this big misconception in our view is that European Union does not represent Europe. It represents 27 countries in Europe, whereas Europe in itself is much larger than that, and Turkey is a founding member of the Council of Europe, which with its 47 members represents the whole of Europe. So as such, one thing, we were disappointed with how the EU looked at Turkey. During the Cold War, we had no other choice or lookout for opportunities. Now we do. This is number one. Another important development is the rise of China, the rise of the concept of Eurasia. That is to say, China moving to the West for economic reasons mostly, but also political and others. But that also put Turkey at the nexus of this Eurasian concept, but with the larger Black Sea region. And as such, Turkey does have a role, a new role to play on a Eurasian concept. But this does not mean that Turkey is looking for alternatives or trying to change its major positions. So I have no hesitation with what General Hodges said, that we should repair the damages with the United States. And I agree, nothing is irreparable. So in that sense, I fully agreed with that. But again, this Karabakh conflict, Karabakh War, showed us another thing, another disturbing thing, in the sense that this is my personal impression, but many colleagues share that with me, that Turkey's assistance to Azerbaijan was disapproved by major Western commentators. And Azerbaijan's victory was to many a disappointment. So in that sense, I cannot understand why a NATO partner, part of the West, part of Europe, was not encouraged to support the righteous cause of Azerbaijan and given, let's say, disapproved comments on this. Another issue that I cannot fathom is Turkey is the only Western country to be a connection for the West, for the USA, for the European Union to extend to Central Asia. I would have expected to be encouraged and to be assisted in this endeavor. What I have seen, what I have witnessed is just the contrary, that we have never received any encouragement or assistance to open up to the East. So this is then another reason which I would say added to our question marks and somehow disrupted our trust. So I, again, fully agree that we need to rebuild that trust. I agree with you, General Hodges, and I agree with the previous speakers that we need to rebuild that trust. And I think, I'm not saying Turkey is pure white and blameless. We all have our mistakes. So we should talk very consciously on them. But I would also like to see that the bias on Turkey, which I think exists, should be done away with, and we should establish retrust in our relations. So I don't want to prolong my words. I just want to welcome you once again, and I hope we can leave enough time for our Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Actually, as a very experienced diplomat, Ambassador Alev Kılıç actually explained what we mean by constructive Eurasianism, what we mean by this term. Actually, I think this was very informative and helpful to understand what kind of relationships we are seeking to form with our friends, with our allies. Thank you very much, sir. So now we finish with the presentations. Our 5 distinguished speakers made their presentations. So now we can start the Q&A. But before that, just briefly, I would like to ask AVİM's advisor, retired Ambassador Yiğit Alpagan, if he would like to add anything on this speeches. Mr. Ambassador Alpagan, would you like to take floor?
I will have a rather short intervention, but before doing this, I would like to start by saluting, first of all, General Ben Hodges, who is a good and old friend, who has been to our place twice. We have been honored with his visits in the past. And I would once more welcome him, as well as my welcome goes to Director Luke Coffey and Mr. Glen Howard. And I hope sincerely that they will be repeating the example of General Hodges by being in person in the headquarters of AVİM and join our collaborative work that we are undertaking with Institute of Ben Hodges so far. I would like to devote a few words to the aftermath of the Nagorno-Karabakh event. And I would rather like to focus on the prospects of Azerbaijan and Armenia for good neighborly relations and regional cooperation. Because I think that it is now time for peace, and we should as well start thinking about what can be done in the field of diplomacy. In this framework, I would like to refer to the statement by the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Armenia, and the President of the Russian Federation, signed on the 10th of November of last year, which ended the hostilities in and around Nagorno-Karabakh. The text that I am talking about is a declaration of 9 points. The last paragraph of the point 9 indeed seems to me as important, or maybe even more important than the previous 8 articles. This paragraph states, by agreement of the parties, the construction of new transport communications linking the Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic with the western regions of Azerbaijan will be provided. The pundits of the Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict and the past efforts to bring a solution to this question will well remember the corridor, quote unquote, in the idea in the 90s. According to that, Nakhchivan Autonomous Republic was going to be linked to the Azeri mainland through a 27-mile or 42-kilometer corridor along the Armenian territory of Zangezur, also known as Megri. This is a map of the recent situation, and in fact reflects the existing, before a permanent peace agreement, reflects the field situation as it is today. The corridor that I am talking about, you can also see from the legends, is at the very south of Armenia and indicated here with a red line. The last paragraph of the 10th of November agreement ending the recent hostilities is now, in a sense, resuscitating this idea. Presently, Nakhchivan and Azerbaijan are separated by the Armenian territory. Therefore, a corridor comprising a railroad and possibly a highway starting from Nakhchivan and reaching Azerbaijan and then, of course, Baku, in a sense, will unify Azerbaijan territorially. Considering the fact that Turkey shares a 6-mile, 10-kilometer border with Nakhchivan, the corridor will mean connecting Turkey to the Caspian Sea and the Central Asian Turkic republics beyond it. In short, the corridor would remove once and for all the basic impediment for Turkey's easy reach to Caspian and Central Asia. Turkey may pin high hopes on this transport link that will connect it directly to Azerbaijan and beyond. This strategic corridor, in my view, promises Turkey big economic gains, geopolitical clout, and further influence in the region. It will provide a gateway all the way to China, in fact. There are even bolder predictions in the Turkish press. For instance, one daily predicted that the corridor would take Turkey to the shores of Pacific. Maybe a big dream, but that is what the paper said. According to the president of Azerbaijan, Aliyev, the provision heralds a new transport corridor in the region. It is indeed, in my personal opinion. However, not everyone in the region seems to share this excitement. Moscow, for one, has shown little interest. Asked about Aliyev's comments, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov declined to comment, saying only that Putin and Aliyev had discussed the unblocking of transport links in the area. As vague as one can get. Turkey's dreams, however, seem always to be Iran's worries. For years, Iran has served as an alternative land link between Nakhchivan and Azerbaijan, making profits commercially and gaining influence over Baku. Iran is now worried about losing that leverage. For example, Iran's Javan daily thinks that Turkey is threatening the geopolitical interests of both Iran and Russia in line with Washington's strategy. Yerevan has yet to vocally state a position, still reeling from its defeat against Turkey-backed Azerbaijan in the war. According to Armenian-American analyst Richard Geragosyan, I quote, "The nature of such an Azerbaijani connection through Armenian territory is dangerously unclear and undefined, raising questions over sovereignty, legal standing, and policing. Because of such ambiguities and other issues, he sees an obvious need for direct negotiations and further agreements." I hope that this opinion is shared by the other parties in Armenia, which could lead to a way out for finding a peaceful solution in the aftermath of the Second Karabakh War. This last point brought about by Mr. Geragosyan brings us to the crux of the matter. The status of Nagorno-Karabakh, which is left unaddressed in the 10th of November agreement, is of primordial importance. The parties have yet to reach a lasting settlement to ensure peace in the region. Expecting Armenia to allow free use of its territory before such a settlement is reached does not seem realistic. Normalization of ties could become a precondition, on the other hand, for Ankara to advance further. In any case, keeping Turkish-Armenian relations off the table could prove difficult in any negotiations on the corridor plans. This will require some degree of calm and political stability in Armenia, together with a viable interlocutor to discuss the outstanding issues. Even if there would appear to be a credible partner, judging from the past experience, this will be no guarantee for a sound and sustained negotiation process given the Armenian character and the adverse effects of diaspora. But Azerbaijan and her leading supporter Turkey can patiently wait, something that loser of the Armenia can ill afford. We just hope that they soon realize this reality. I thank you very much.
Okay. One moment, please.